Hi everyone, Gary here from Echidna Sewing, and today we're going to take a look at how to assemble the table and stand for the VMA Industrial Overlocker. So here it is. Perhaps you've just received it in the mail or you're thinking about ordering one. We're going to go through how to actually unbox and assemble the stand in its entirety. Make sure first when you've received it that the box has arrived without any obvious damage if you can. This one's obviously perfect. And first thing I'm going to do is grab my scissors, and these are not good fabric scissors, so don't panic. They're some old clunkers that we have. We're just going to cut all the straps away. I'm just going to move this top piece of cardboard, and it's a little bit tough to get out of there, but we don't need that anymore, so I'm going to get rid of that. And this is probably easier when it's on the ground for you, but I'm just trying to do it so we're getting a good video. There are the legs. I'm just going to take everything off and sit it back here out of the way. We've got our foot pedal, we've got the little drawer with all the hardware in it. I'm just going to pop that underneath my bench there. So now we'll take these are the feet that actually screw onto the bench. We'll just pop them under there for a moment. Then we have this is the pedal for the foot lift. Pop that under there as well. The other leg, pop that over there. And then we have the foot pedal brace. Might just pop that back there. And then we have the back brace, the main back brace on the bench itself. And then we have a piece of cardboard. Now that piece of cardboard is important. Now, I'll point out, I'm doing this on an old workbench that I use to build up my machines. If you've got an old trestle table or something like that, they're ideal. These are not very heavy benches, so a standard sort of trestle table will be fine, and it's much easier to do it at this height than it is working on the floor. But take that piece of cardboard that protects the surface of the bench and just put it on your bench here. And then we're going to lift this part of the bench out of the box carefully. Take the little plastic cap bits off. They can just fall back into the box. And that's what it looks like. Now, I'm going to now turn this around and lay it back on top of the cardboard so it doesn't get scratched or damaged. So now we're ready to start working on it. Okay, we're ready to go. Let's find the pieces that we need first. So obviously we need the parts of the legs that screw on to the bench. So I'm going to pop them up there. And the other thing I need to get out is the drawer that has all the hardware in it. And at this stage, I'm going to grab my ruler, my steel ruler. In fact, we might even pan across here. Here are some of the tools that I use when I put these stands together. I'm going to identify them as I go through and show you what's necessary. But right now I'm just going to get my steel rule. And the reason I'm using that is I'm going to use that to break open that plastic and open up the hardware kit. And we've got all the different nuts and bolts in there, so we'll open that up at the same time and just pour them into the drawer. And we can discard that plastic now. So we've got everything ready to go there. The first thing we're going to do is identify as I'm standing at it or as you're looking at it, it's the left-hand leg here, but for me it's on my right side. And you'll notice that the hollow here, there's an outside and an inside section. The hollow section goes to the inside of the bench. And we're going to locate this at a specific position that is in fact 5 centimeters from the back of the bench to the starting point of that bracket. 5 centimeters, 9.5 centimeters, and just roughly get yourself 9.5 centimeters up at that point there too. And at this point you'll find in your kit you've got some little tiny hex head wood screws, and I am now going to use my drill. It's much easier if you have a little cordless drill. I'm going to set my clutch up reasonably high. And as long as that's in the correct position, I'm going to put one screw in there. Don't over tighten it just yet. So once you've got that in, double check that you've still got 9.5 centimeters, which I have. And come around and put, another screw in there. A little bit more clutch. That's nice. So that is in perfectly. Now, next step is to grab the leg that goes into that section, which will be, in my case, this leg here. Again, the hollow goes into the hollow there, and that will just slip over like so. And then you take one of the large hex bolts there, and we just start that into that bolt, or that nut there, and let your clutch out on your drill, and just nip that up. Don't over tighten it, just enough to hold that in place. I will be loosening that again in a moment. We then have these flat double nut plates here, and we have two bolts. So these are the same bolt as I used over here, which is the little hex bolt. And this goes on the inside here. Hopefully the camera can see it, and the bolt comes through from the outside. You'll see there's only one way that can really go, and another one on this side here. Just finger tighten those. And a little tip, if you have got a small magnetic spirit level, it's a great opportunity to use it. What I want to make sure is that I've got this leg sitting nice and perpendicular, and that's pretty well close enough. And at that point, using my drill, I'm just going to nip up these screws. I'm not going to over tighten them. I just want them to be holding that sufficiently well enough. I'm now going to put the leg on this one over here on the other side, hollow there. And even though I haven't screwed it in, it'll all make sense in a moment. I've found after doing hundreds and hundreds of these stands, this is by far the easiest way to do it. And we're just going to nip that up a little bit. And I'm just going to lay that down now because I don't need it quite yet. I will take the main back brace that goes along the back of the stand. VMA, that's their logo, that's up the right way. You need to turn it around because we're working upside down. The camera might need to come around the back here now, possibly. Two nuts here, so we just simply finger tighten the hex bolt into there, two of them. No need to tighten that at all, just so that that's not going to fall off. Leave that sitting there. And now I take the other leg that we've already got the base connected to, and we have two bolts. So I just hold that in position. Same thing again, two bolts, and just finger tighten those. Not even finger tight really, you want to be able to move this around quite easily. And that will now support the weight of it. At this point, take your ruler, and we need 5 centimeters at the back, just as we did back over on this section. 5 centimeters from the base to the back side of the bench, and that's correct. But before we put a screw in, you've got to make sure it's the right distance apart. And if I take my tape, I want to measure 730. So we're coming, that's 730 to that section there, and that's coming from the inside over here. That is the correct measurement. As long as you've got 730 there, you're in good shape. Again, double checking that I'm still 5 centimeters from the back. I am. Now I'll take another one of the wood screws, and I will now tighten that up. So I'm going to come around the front of the machine now, or the bench, and again, I want 730. So just move that so as we've got 730 right here. And once you've achieved that, take another wood screw and straight down into there. So I know that's in the correct position now. Now at this point, we're going to now take the flat double nut panel, and I'm going to put that on the inside again, and whoops, that's not the right screw, that's the right screw. And just finger tighten that. And there's another one just there. And we can now double check with your spirit level, wherever I left that, there it is. Again, that we are somewhat perpendicular there, which it's pretty reasonable. In fact, it's probably better than the other side. I think I've got to correct the other side a little bit. And we'll just nip these guys up. I'm not over tightening at the moment, by the way. In fact, that's more than enough that I need to do just presently. I also didn't have a quick look at things and just eyeball it and make sure they're right. Now you'll notice at this stage we've actually got some movement, and we take that out when we do the brace up. But I did mention on this side, I feel that I'm not exactly perpendicular. And if I wanted to sort of move that around a bit, I would undo this one and undo these again. And I've just moved that. I've actually twisted that to my left, and then I'm going to tighten these guys up. And that'll do me for now. So that's all perpendicular. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm not going to tighten this up just yet. What I am going to do is put the pedal brace on, and that sits up under here like that. And you'll notice there's some little pressed out pieces here that sit on the inside of the leg, and that keeps these legs out in the correct position. And we have two flat nuts that look like this. You should have two of those. One of the large hex bolts. So this nut goes in under the channel there, and you literally let it sit on your finger, push it under, slide it under the hole in the brace, and just gently put that screw on. Don't tighten it at all, just finger tight, not even finger tight. It's really just getting the screw started. I'm going to go to the other side now and do the same thing over here. Now that that's done, we need to set this at a correct position. Now, you'll notice we can have it anywhere. It's a bit of a personal preference. If you prefer your foot pedal way back further under the bench, you can set it there, or further forward. Generally speaking, I've set almost every machine I've ever sent out with these red caps pushed on correctly at 14 centimeters to the edge of the red cap. It's not a critical measurement, it just needs to be virtually the same on both sides. And at that point, at 14, I'm just going to nip. I'm not going to tighten it too hard because I need to do the other side. And again, push the red cap on properly. And we're going to go 14 centimeters, and that's about perfect. And we're just going to nip that up. So at this point, I'm just going to make sure everything looks pretty square. It does look great. And then I put the spirit level on this side here, and I just make sure that if I push, you can see I've got a bit of lateral movement, so I'm just going to square that up. That looks pretty good there. How does it look on that side? Pretty good, I'm happy with that. And now I can just tighten one of the back brace screws on one side and tighten one of the back brace screws on the other side. And now that's nice and firm. Double check that I'm somewhere in the right vicinity with my spirit level, which it is, it's okay, pretty happy. Yeah, maybe not, maybe that can go over a bit, so you can spend a little bit of time doing this. I won't bore you with the details, but I'm going to undo that again and undo that one. And then I'm pushing that over a bit further, and now I'm going to nip that up a bit harder. And I think that's a little bit squarer. Yes, it is. Would have been okay as it was, but I just like it to be as good as it can be. Anyway, so we'll just nip up all those screws now. And at this point, you can go around with your drill and give all of these a bit of a tighten and make sure that nothing's going to give away or move. Okay, next thing is to put the brackets on for the pedals. Okay, next step is to put the pedals on the machine. So that was the pedal for our presser foot lift. And this is the pedal for the speed control. I'm going to come around the front of the machine again now. Again, just cut that plastic away. And all we need to do first is to put the bracket on that connects to the pitman rod for the pedal. So that's a bracket that sits just there like so. And you'll see you're going to have some smaller hex nuts and some smaller, or hex screws and hex nuts. And we just put this in here like that. Screw that on, just finger tighten it for a start. And there's the other one. And there will be another smaller nut in there, there is. And to get that started. And that's got that going, so finger tighten that. They are 10mm nuts and bolts. So I'm going to grab my 10mm spanner and my shifting spanner. And what I like to do there is just put the shifting spanner on the inside, and you can tighten these up right now. Make sure they're nice and firm. Could have used the drill probably, but probably won't get it tight enough with the drill. You don't want this coming loose. That'll do it. And this guy actually sits up around about this position just here. And the way we do that is we have these brackets that will sit on under there like so. You'll have one either side. Easiest way to do this is get this one in first, and you'll notice I put it in about as far as it goes to the right on this slot here. There are different slots, different people will have different sitting positions, so you can play around with that to suit you. And we just put a nut underneath there and just finger tighten that, and you'll see that will sit in there like so, and then this bracket will sit there like that. And that pivots up and down. So right now I'll just get this started in that position there with one of the nuts. Now you could actually reverse these and put the hinge, the nut and the bolt, so it's on the inside and you wouldn't see it. Personally, I find it a bit easier to have it on the outside. It's easier to adjust if you ever want to change the position. And we'll just position this in here and just kind of just finger tighten all this into place. They're 14mm nuts on here, so I'm just going to use my 14mm spanner and just tighten this one up first and make sure that I've got enough free play in that so as the pedal will move up and down comfortably. You don't want it sort of binding at all. Same thing there now. And that's pretty good. I'll tighten that up with a socket wrench in a little bit time. Now the next one is the lever or the pedal for the foot lift. And this one goes just beside it on the left as we're looking at it right now. Now, there is an argument for positioning this on the inside because we can then get a bit closer to the pedal. So you can see there, if I put it on this side, I can get somewhat closer to this pedal than if I put this on the outside like that. Hope that makes sense. Sometimes you might find also that this can be a little bit splayed here. So this one is a wee bit, so I'm just going to use my shifting spanner and I'm just going to pull that in a bit. Square it up a little. It's a little bit squarer now. All fixed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these ones on the inside of the pedal. So grab another bolt. And position that just there. And you'll see, hopefully camera can see that. That will sit there, and the bracket on this side will essentially sit here. So basically that's got to go across a fair bit. And that's going to go in there, and that's going to go there like that. So now that I've decided where it's got to go, we'll get the bolt, put it in there, another nut, and we won't tighten anything just yet. We'll just get this into position, and you've got to kind of, there we go. So now we can get our 14mm spanner under there. I'm going to tighten that one first. I'm going to tighten this one. There we go. So we now have both pedals positioned, and we will tighten those up in a moment. Before I get the socket wrench out to actually tighten all the feet, all these bolts, I'm going to put the feet on. Just make sure that the nut is screwed all the way down, and they just screw into each available hole where the red caps are. Don't screw them all the way down, they don't need to be. You do have a bit of adjustment. If you're on an uneven floor, you can adjust the height of all these independently. But what I do is I have a spirit level, and I just make sure they're somewhat level. So going over to my tool bench here, I'm going to put that on there. That's pretty much perfect. I've screwed them in pretty much the same depth both sides, and that one can come up a little bit, and that one can go down a little bit. That's perfect. And now in order to tighten those, it is the 19mm spanner. I have a flat 19mm spanner. You may not have one of those. You may need to use whatever spanner you have, but this is a standard 19mm spanner will actually do the job, to be honest. So just nip those up. Don't need to be super tight. Remember, they are adjustable if you're on an uneven floor. And nip that one. And just make sure they are screwed down past the red cap that goes on there. That's all done. So they're tight. These are in place. Pretty much that's all the stand done. The last thing I do now is take my socket wrench, or you know what, I could just take my 14mm spanner and tighten them up. But if you've got a socket wrench, it's just easier. And in this case, I'm going to use both the spanner and the socket wrench, and I'm going to tighten that and that. I'm going to tighten these guys. Do tighten these nice and firmly. That's firm. Tighten the side up here. So before you tighten this one, I want you to tighten both these side screws. Now there is a little bit of movement for height adjustment here. If you're in a position where you wanted to move this whole thing down, you can take this screw out and leave it out, and you can actually, in fact, you can raise the whole thing if you take that out. These two side screws are sufficient to hold it all in place, but where it is now with that screw, with this this leg extended all the way to that screw, that's going to give you about a perfect bench height of 70 centimeters, which I find for most people is just spot on. So we're going to tighten up the sides first. So make sure they are nice and firm, and that keeps the correct angle for me. And then we tighten up this one. That's all good. I'll come and do the other side. And then we'll do this one. And that is a rock solid bench that's not going anywhere. While we're got it at this level, we might put the drawers on. One thing I had forgotten is you've got to get underneath this little pedal here. Easier to do it from the back. and tighten these guys up as well. They're done, and I'm pretty sure I did that one. Yes, I did. So they're all done. Stand's built. Next we'll put the drawer on. So next we'll put this the plastic drawer on. It's quite handy. 2 little runners. You will often find a few extra screws and bolts and things in there. We'll take those out and leave them over there for a minute. And you've got these little tiny screws. You will only need 6 of them. So they're giving you a couple of spares by the looks of it. And basically the drawer just sits a little bit in from the front of the bench just there. And these runners sit in on there. And basically we're working upside down. Much easier to do this now in this angle than it is upside down when you've got the bench all up the right way. So with the drawer positioned correctly and the runner positioned roughly where you want it, where you position this will determine how far back the drawer will slide, and that's about where I set them right there. Just get one screw in first. Don't over tighten these screws, you'll go straight through the plastic. Make sure that this runner is nice and square with the edge. And don't do the center one yet. Come across the other side and do this guy first. So again, push the drawer back, make sure the runner and the drawer are pushing sort of together. Put this one in. And then go to the back, do the back one. Whoops, trying to keep my fingers out of the way here, but not going real great. There we go. Now, pull the drawer out halfway, because what that does is it just positions that, spaces these runners to accept the slightly wider section at the back. So do that, and then put that in, and that guy in there. Whoops, there we go. And then we can push that in and out comfortably. Drawer is on. Okay, so now the next step is to open the box, because the other bits of hardware are in there that we're going to need for the full stand assembly. And again, my old daggy scissors, we'll cut that away. Now there are some staples in here, and I might just quickly cut that plastic or the tape. Make sure that's out the way. That's good. Please make sure you get some sort of long nose pliers or something and take those staples out. Don't leave them in the box, because I can tell you from first-hand experience, if you lift the box up and those staples are still in there, it's very easy to cut yourself. They're quite sharp, so we don't want those. And then we can open this up, and you will see there's another box in here to start with. I'm going to leave that there and open it in situ. And don't get a big box cutter and slide through it, because you may cut something that's in there. So let's have a look and see what is in there. I might lift that up and put it on top here. It might be easier for the camera. So we've got our power cable. Put that over there. Little accessory kit with the needle screwdrivers and all sorts of little bits and pieces in there. A machine cover. We'll just put that over there for now. Some basic instructions and parameter guides. We've got our thread stand. The things I'm looking for right now is my speed controller, because I'm going to screw that in, and the Pitman rod. That's the rod that connects the pedal to that guy there. And there will be a little pack of 3 screws, and at the moment that's all I really need. So let's go back to the machine, and this is your speed controller that connects to this pedal here, and basically it just screws onto the back of the machine about there. Open those 3 screws up, get my drill. There's no specific position for this. It's basically centering it basically between the center of the back of the cutout for the machine and the back of the bench, and pretty much under where the pedal rod will connect. Again, it's not critical, doesn't matter if it's off a centimetre or an inch either side, it's completely irrelevant. And then just screw that in, and you've also got 2 more slots. Now I do it this way. I prefer to do it this way instead of the other way around. So, you know, I've seen these put on machines in all sorts of different configurations. This is the way I think it works best. Okay, put that one in. So that's not going anywhere, that's nice and firm. This is called a pitman rod, and what we do is we need a 10mm spanner. And you notice I've got some oil here, and the reason I have that is I'm going to undo this little connector here so these are separated, and then I'm going to take this nut and washer off. And I'm going to screw this up a little bit so you can see what I do here. Camera might need to get a good shot of this. This is a spring-loaded little ball and socket. And it's a good idea to put a good dollop of oil in there and just press that around. And what I do to start with is I push this guy up into there. So it goes onto the pedal bracket. The washer then goes on, and then we just nip that. Whoops, put that nut on, don't drop it. Got oil on my fingers, so it's all slippery. I'm not going to worry about tightening it just yet, just going to leave that sitting there. And then I'm going to do the same thing down the bottom. I'm going to take that nut and wash her off. Put some good oil down. You can push that in and get a good dollop of oil in that. And it doesn't hurt to oil this every few months, just it'll last forever then. And that just sits on there, and that goes into there, and that nut goes on there. And at this point, grab your shifting spanner and just grab that nut there with your shifter and tighten this guy up. Nice and firmly, same thing up here. That's all we need, and then this connecting bracket just goes into there, and you don't worry about setting this specifically at the moment because you'll vary that depending on your seating position. But I generally just take it just down. There's horizontal for the pedal. I find that I usually get it about right at about that level. But again, you'll adjust that once it's up the other way and you've got your right sitting position. So just nip that up. So that's all done. Now we just need to clamp this cable down. So these are little cable clamps. They're not included in the kit, but we do put them in every machine we send out. If you're doing the assembly yourself, it just is a bit neater. So you just need a hammer, and just stops this cable from sitting around awkwardly underneath the bench. And we just put them then. Don't hit them too hard. I'd rather you be able to move that cable just a smidgen than clamping it too hard. And so we just put 3 in, one at that point there, another one around the back here, just to hold it. That's a little bit more, that's good. And then another one just about here. And that'll keep that cable out of harm's way. Okay, that's about it with the machine with the bench in this configuration. Next step is to tip it up the correct way. So now we just want to tip this cabinet up. Now ideally, if you've got 2 people to do that, it's really easy. Just one on either end, tip it up the right way. I'm here by myself, and we can't have our lovely camera lady letting go of the camera while we do it. So I'm going to do this myself. They're not that heavy, they're just a little awkward, but the best way to do it is have the back of the bench towards you, and then just lift, come back a bit, just gently put it down, let the bench sit on your shoes, and then grab it and tip it up that way. That's it, nice and easy. Okay, we're going to go through the hardware now that actually forms the base for the machine to sit on. Re-emptying this box again. So we've got the cable, we've got the accessories, we've got the cover. This is the bag of machine rubbers and bolts. We're going to be using those. That is the slide for the as the waste catcher. And we've got the 4-spool thread stand. Again, all our paraphernalia there. Basic accessories, spare fuel, it doesn't use fuel, spare oil filter and screwdrivers and all sorts of things in there. More screwdrivers, but most importantly, we've also got the machine base that we're going to be using. So I'm gently going to put that there. I don't want to scratch the table, so I will be careful. And at this point, we're going to open up this bag of goodies. And so you've got these nuts here that actually will go compress into the timber. So they sit there like that, and that's the bolt that comes up underneath and holds this base to the top. Those guys just sit in there. We are going to make a racket in a minute and knock those down into the bench, and you will have 4 of those. So you pop those in there. Now I do suggest, if you've got one, this is just an old bolt that I have from a previous installation of some kind, and it's got a nice big hex head on it, and it's sacrificial. I don't care what happens to it. This is where you do need to make a bit of noise, and we do need to tap these guys down because they actually have a square section here that will get pushed down and securely pushed into the ply so it doesn't turn when we tighten the bolt from underneath. Now you want to be careful with this. If you're not comfortable using a hammer, get someone who is, and just basically hold that bolt there and give it a good few taps. And I mean a few solid taps, like you've got to really, it's got to be almost flush with that. Well, it has to have to be flush with the timber or the laminate. So we come back here and do the same thing. That's done. Same thing here. And don't slip and hit the bench because you will make a mess of your bench if you do. And it's not that hard to do. That's good. And one more here. Done. So they're all in there securely. I don't need that bolt anymore. Now, let's have a look at what you've got here. These little rubbers here are the machine rubbers. We don't need them just yet, so we're going to put them back over here. You're going to have 4 bolts and 4 little, basically shock absorbing rubbers, if you want to call them that. And you're going to have 8 washers. So each rubber will have 2 washers. There's a couple of ways you can actually do this. So essentially what happens is this sits under here. Whoops, get it the right way. Helps. Goes that way. This sits under here like that. And there's the bolts go up from under and screw into here. Now, we can position this with the rubbers. I'm going to get down on my knees here for a minute. With these rubbers, either between the base and the bench. I might do it from this side. So either between the base and the bench. That will position this tray quite a bit lower. And that does restrict access to your to the door on the front of the overlocker when you open it. So that's not how I do it. I basically will put a washer under there, on top of there and under there. And then that will go up. Just pop that there for a minute. So the bolt comes up with a washer either side of the bolt. Washer either side of the rubber. And it will come up from under there and just screw that into one of the nuts that you've just put in under the bench, into the bench. Just get it finger tight now. You don't need to do anything more than that. And now we'll get this next one, another bolt. And going to do this one beside on my right, and so that's done. And then next one, and you'll find they will line up perfectly. At least I've never had one not line up perfectly. And then the last bit here that goes in under there. And once you've got that in position, we can grab our Allen keys. So you will need some Allen keys to do this. 6mm Allen key. And you can just now screw those up. And what the rubbers do is they form like a shock absorber to suppress any noise and vibration through the bench. And one thing you will find on these overlockers is they're so quiet. It's hard to imagine. And so just nip those up first. So nip them as hard as you can with the vertical Allen key, and then we'll go back and close that out or tighten that up with it on the small side. Okay, and then just, oops, helps if you go the right way. So you don't want to go crazy because you're just going to compress those rubbers to be too compressed, but you do need to make sure they're firm and they're not going to, it's not going to work its way loose. Oops. Again, it does help if you go the right way. Having a crazy moment then. That's nice. Right, that's good. That's nice and firm. That's not going anywhere. So 3 of them have pins and 1 doesn't. And basically they go in here. And you'll notice there's a bit of a slot in here. That's a little bit of wiggle room to get the machine positioned perfectly. But generally speaking, it's going to be hard up against this surface here. That one's going to go into this hole here. So just push that in nice and firmly. This one goes back here like that. I'm pretty sure, I'll stand corrected, but I'm pretty sure the one without the pin goes at the front just here like that. And now we just got to get the overlocker out of the box. Okay, now I've taken lots of these overlockers out of boxes over the years, so I'm pretty used to it. You may want to get someone to help you. They're still fairly heavy. We'll take the foam out first, and you will see there's a bottle of oil in the foam packaging. So just discard that for a minute. And there's a plastic bag over the top of it. I'm going to move that out the way. And what I find the best thing to do is to take the overlocker out and put it straight on the floor and then reposition myself. Now, if you're doing this by yourself and you feel you're comfortable to do it, remember, these things are heavy. They weigh about 30 odd kilograms. So please be mindful of that. What you can do is underneath this section here is if we get the camera down and having a look here, this is the presser foot mechanism here, and it's quite okay to put your fingers under there and lift from that position. And it's also quite okay to lift from the hand wheel. So don't use this to lift because you'll bend it. That's the thread guide. And if I lift straight up now and just put it on the ground, it's done. They're actually, no, they're probably lighter than 30 Ks, probably closer to 20. So they're not too bad. And that is the right orientation for me now to pick it up and put it straight into the bench. So all I'm going to do now, bend with my knees, lift, nice and high, position it down so that the little rubbers fall into the right place. That's pretty good. The pins have all gone in. The machine's sitting exactly where we need it to. Everything's in place nicely. And that's it. That's all there is to putting it into the bench. Okay, so we're on the home straight now. A couple of things left to do. One is to assemble the thread stand, but before we do that, I'm going to grab this little chain bag, because this is the chain that connects the presser foot lift to the presser foot lift pedal. And you've got a couple of S hooks there that we're going to use. Before I do that even, I'm going to make sure I take the power cable out from in behind there. That just simply goes down there. Remember, these machines are direct drive machines, so there's no motors or belts to worry about, so we can just hang that cable down there. All we've got to do now is decide where we want the, or how high we want the chain to be. Now the S hooks will need a bit of bending out, so just get a pair of pliers, just bend that out a little bit. I usually put the top bit on first, and I just hang a couple of extra links up here just to give me a couple if I need to extend a little bit, probably a little bit more. It's easier to work up the top if you do want to extend it. And then just pull that S hook back down again, so it's hooked in there and can't come out. Going to open up the top bit now, and essentially that just goes into that right there. I'm not going to worry about closing that for now, it's not needed, but I am now going to go to the bottom and work down here. And that's going to come across and basically go to this level here. This guy right here. So I'm just going to open up the S hook again. And position that in there, and then I'm going to close that on there so it doesn't come out. And open up the top bit of the S hook. And at this point, holding that up, I want to get kind of the right pedal height that suits me, or the person, whoever's using it. That's too high. And that's probably a good height right there. Maybe up one more link, I think. It's a bit of a hit and miss thing until you get it right. And then I'm going to close that S hook. And that's it, done. So there's one other adjustment worthy of looking at the moment, and that is this guy here. And that determines how much presser foot lift there is. At the moment I don't have a lot of lift. I'm going to change this a bit. So in the little bag of tools that you have with the machine, there is an 8mm spanner. So just undo that nut, and what we're going to do is screw that screw down, and that will allow me to get more lift height on my presser foot. That's a personal thing. You can have it to whatever height you want. That's now given me another few millimeters of lift, and I think that's a better lift than was set, but pretty simple. Make sure that you tighten that up again, and that's that. So presser foot lift is in place, and all we got to do now is put the thread stand together. So thread stand, let me just grab my scissors and cut this bag open. Lots of components to this, and you know what, I tend to not want to do this on the bench. I don't want to scratch my bench, so I'm going to open that over on this cardboard box. First thing we're going to do is take the main stand that screws to the table. You'll notice you've got one big nut there, then you've got a rubber washer, and then you've got two steel washers. How this goes is the steel washer goes first up to that flange, and then that goes in there like that, and then you put the rubber washer on top of the steel washer on top of the nut and screw that up from underneath and tighten this guy up nice and firmly. And if you need a shifter or some spanner that's going to fit, That shifter's pretty good. And just make sure that's nice and firmly tightened. All good to go. You've got 4 arms to deal with. You'll see there's 2 that have got little eyelets in them and 2 that don't. The 2 that don't go on first, and they go on the bottom part. So we just basically position them here and here. We'll tighten them up very soon. And in this other little bag of goodies, we have the connector or the coupler that will couple the top of the stand to the bottom of the stand. And you'll notice you've got a Phillips hex head screw there and a nut on the other side. These nuts have little self-lockers that actually stop them from turning. And I like to do it this way, put that in there and put that in there, and then grab my electric driver. You can use a screwdriver if you like, and turn the clutch down so we don't go crazy with it, and just nip this up a little bit each time. And I let the clutch engage then, and that's now pretty firm. I'm very happy with that. This little rubber bit comes off the top. That's just a grommet that closes that edge off. Now before I put these guys on the top here, what I do need to do is put this little clamping system on that holds the thread guide arms that direct the threads. And basically it goes on with, I like to have the Phillips screw on the upside rather than on the downside. So Phillips screw, straight over here, and then just slide that down and just leave it about midway. It doesn't matter, we're going to come back to that, and then go ahead and put on these guys. And what I like to do is then set these guys up towards the top and tighten them up nice and square. And there we go. Now I'll do the same here. Bring this up to about that height there. Nice. And nice. All good. You've got 4 spool pins. So take the nut. You've got a nut and a spring washer and then a washer. And then this guy has some little flanges just there. They sit into these little flange sections here, so that goes into there first. That one will go into there, and you've just got to get the washer, the nut, the standard washer, then the spring washer, and then the nut on. And nip those up. And they're going to be an 8mm spanner again. But I'll tighten them all up at the same time. Same thing here. That goes into there, nut, the washer, then the spring washer, and then the nut. Then we'll tighten that up in a minute. And then 2 more. Washer, spring washer, then the nut. Okay, so grab your 8mm spanner then and just tighten those guys up. Okay, so they're all tight now. Now if you do find that one's a little bit crooked, just give it a bit of a bend until it's nice and straight. That's pretty good now. Okay, so once you've got all that square, just pop these little guys on here. And another one there. There is a little cutout in the center of them, you'll see it. And then your little thread mushroom caps. They just stop your spools from, the bigger spools, from sort of bouncing around a bit. So they just push on to the spindle like that. They also help to hold the foam in place. So that's all done. And all we need to do now is put the 2 thread guide wires on. So this is just the arm that holds the actual guide wire. This is the wire, the guide that sits about here and directs the threads into the machine. So this guy goes into this section just here. Push that in nice and firmly. And you can tighten that. Sometimes it's easier to do with a screwdriver, but I'm going to have a crack with this. Whoops, no, screwdriver is going to be easier, but I am going to tighten this section up here with my drill. And that's firm enough. So this guy sits on this arm here, and you'll notice there's an input for the thread and an output. They look different. This has got a bigger entry point, and it's a much smaller exit point on the outside. So this goes on like in that angle. So basically, as you see it there, you may need to move this to position accordingly, but that just slides on to this guy here. And you just slide it a little bit in there, and this is where you just got to maneuver things around a bit until it's perfect. So these threads will come down to the needle, these threads will come down to the looper threads, and that's pretty good. I'm happy with that position, so I'm just going to tighten these guys now. And tighten this one. Whoops, it's on the other side. That's good. And I think we're all pretty much good to go. So we just try and balance everything up. These eyelets should always be directly above the spools, always. And this can be positioned kind of anywhere. It doesn't really matter. You've got a bit of flexibility there. Pop our grommet back in the top. Oops, almost forgot. One more thing to do. We've got the waste catcher slide, and this is really good because you can have a rubbish bin under the machine and all your waste cut off will go to a rubbish bin. You've also got the filler cap for putting the oil in, but that's part of the next video. We've got a little bag of screws in there, and what happens is this guy sits in here like that, and then this guy screws up underneath like so. So what I'm going to do first is pop this one into position. Now, you've got to be careful. You can see here, if you have a look down through the screw hole, we want that to be pretty much as far forward this way as it can be, because we don't want to be too close to the edge of the timber. So generally speaking, pull it forward, and it's only got one position it can go. And we'll just open this little bag of screws up, again with the drill. So with this held forward, a little bit more clutch on that. That's in, nice. Same deal here. Make sure you center the screw nicely. Good. And then you can open this up and get a bit clearer run to that screw. A little bit further. Yep, that's not going anywhere. And you'll see here that this will come apart, and that allows you to extend this to a longer extension. And this is the slightly more awkward one because you actually have to get up underneath here and position this so as that the screws are again far enough away from the edge of the timber to not split anything. And that's pretty good. So I'm going to see how we go there. And up into there. Once you get one in, it's easy. Don't over tighten it because you'll just crack the plastic. So just be a little bit mindful of that. There's no stress on this thing. And if I get this screw out, we're in good shape. So it should be one more screw to go in, and that is right there. There it is. So that's the catcher is in position. And then in function or in use, you just simply position that there, and then you can pop a waste bin down at the end there and it'll catch all your waste. Okay, now the machine's in the bench, of course we do need to connect the cable, and you've got your power cable, and it has a very specific plug that plugs into this that is already plugged into the machine or wired into the machine. Best way to do that is just bring the cable up under here and find the correct orientation, put that in, and then make sure you put the little locking cap into place, and that holds it together nice and securely. That can then sit just straight down through the back of the machine. And finally, we also have the cable that connects the speed control mechanism to the machine, to the motor, and that just pops up through the back here as well. And it only goes on basically one way. There is a little clip. If you push that little boot back down, you'll see there's the clip there. Hopefully we've got that on camera. And there's the receptor just up here. And that will just plug straight into there. Now you just got to make sure that you've got enough cable. Remember, we did put some clips underneath the bench to hold that on the bench. If you haven't got enough length in it, just lengthen that a wee bit. And I'm just going to pull that through a little bit further. If you recall, I said make sure that the clips are loose enough to slide the cable through. And there, that's now connected nice and neatly. So that's your cable connections. So there you have it. We've assembled the stand, we've put the bench on, we've got the machine mounted, we've done the thread stand, we've got the catcher in place, and we've connected the pedals. Everything's good to go. So that's how you assemble the stand and set this machine up. And as far as the next step, well, that's another video. So hope this helped you with your assembly. And if you have any questions, as always, just give us a call. Cheers.